Is there any credible evidence to support the dietary guideline recommendation to limit saturated fat? I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at DietDoctor.com. And if you've been following Diet Doctor, we've been reporting over the years that the evidence really doesn't support the guidelines suggesting that we reduce saturated fat. Well, now we have even more sort of fuel to the fire to try and convince the members of the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee that this really needs to be reevaluated. The time has come. They should not be able to ignore this anymore. And what I'm talking about is it was a workshop in Washington, D.C., sponsored by the Nutrition Coalition, but led by Dr. Ann Ostrup and Dr. Ronald Krauss, who we've had on this on the podcast at Diet Doctor. And what they found was they actually had 11 total experts, and they summarized sort of the evidence. And basically, to read from this post I wrote, the meta-analysis of both adequately controlled randomized trials of saturated fatty acid reduction and observational studies have found no significant evidence for effects of dietary saturated fat intake on cardiovascular disease or total mortality. Boom. Mic drop, as they say, right? That's all you need. That these experts who aren't devoutly in the ketogenic camp, right? They're not trying to promote a ketogenic diet. They're not so-called LDL deniers. Ronald Krauss has been a co-author on many papers and guidelines about how important LDL is. He is a leading scientist and lipidologist, and he, along with these other experts, agree that the science doesn't back up the recommendation. And this is what I think is so important. If people without agendas, people who aren't trying to push a certain way of thinking, people are just trying to evaluate the science, and they're experts evaluating the science, and they concur that the science doesn't back the recommendations. There's no evidence that current population-wide arbitrary limits on consumed saturated fats in the U.S. will prevent cardiovascular disease or reduce mortality. And that makes a difference, because when the dietary guidelines say something, that's what's followed in schools, that's what's followed in the military, in hospitals, in retirement homes for older people. They have to follow the dietary guidelines. So it affects what people eat. It affects how ranchers how ranchers raise their cattle, and it affects our food supply. I mean, it's so wide-reaching. I recommend you listen to the podcast I had with Nina Teicholz about this, because she's an expert on the guideline committees, and it was very eye-opening. But this consensus report, this update from these experts, really just has to push the guideline committees even further to open their eyes and realize that this cap on saturated fats, on natural saturated fats, natural food saturated fats that has been propagated down for decades, does not have the scientific evidence to back it up. It's time for things to change. Hope this was helpful. You can go to DietDoctor.com to learn more about it. And definitely check out the Nutrition Coalition. Really, they're pushing for a stronger evidence-based the dietary guidelines. And like I said, I had a great podcast with Nina Teicholz. I really enjoyed talking to her. She's wonderful to listen to about this. And you can go to their website to learn more about them. All right. Have a great day, and take care, everybody.